Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the California ISO Demand and Distributed Energy Market Integration Working Group. My name is Brenda Marquez. On behalf of the Stakeholder Affairs, we welcome you to today's call for August 19th of the working group sessions that we have been conducting. At this time, we will go ahead and do a few meeting reminders as this call is being recorded for informational and convenience purposes only. Any related transcription should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. As this meeting is structured to stimulate dialogue and different perspectives, we definitely encourage folks to submit questions through our chat and our verbal queue with the raised hands. And also just encourage dialogue to continue. We definitely refrain from repeating anything that's been previously said in order for us to manage our time effectively. As well for today's few meeting instructions about the new WebEx, we just have that raise hand icon located on the bottom of your screen. If you have trouble locating that to ask a question, let us know through the chat. We'll be able to help you. Tegan's my event producer today, so she will be monitoring also chat questions for technical issues, as well for those who are logged into the call outside of the WebEx via like phone line, you'll have to utilize the press star 3 to be added to the question queue. And at the time that you're asked to be unmuted, will be unmuted. You'll have to provide your full name affiliation because we don't know your name by basically the phone number provided. Also, for those attendees, you're welcome to see the transparency view. That opportunity is to see everyone's full name and also organization. They listed it under that transparency view. Please feel free to refresh it periodically to see the full list. But this time, we definitely encourage those folks to kind of keep an eye out who's attendee as well. The closed captioning is also available for folks who are following us to listen in exactly what words are being discussed. So it's on the bottom left of your screen. And if you do forget, I will remind folks to provide their full name affiliation before sending comment. We definitely want to capture that in our recording as we will be posting this on our YouTube channel and on the Stakeholder Center under Demand and Distributed Energy Market Integration activity. So at this time, let's go ahead and quickly just go through the stakeholder process. At this point, we are in the working group phase. We're still working towards the next steps later on in proposal development phase. So thanks so much for everyone who has been giving us a lot of feedback from the discussion paper and the other documents we posted. And then now we'll go ahead and kick off the agenda today. We do have Juan Bertago, who is our account manager, and is also leading us here with the working group progress and today's goals. He also has a few items to discuss, such as finalizing the demand flexibility problem statements, and then also the reliability DR participation problem statements. We also have Ansel. He's our senior policy developer for this working group, as well as other ones that we have in the policy initiative phase. So he will be in that. He's also here, right here with us. We do have Jill Powers, who's also our manager in the policy developer as well. And then we do have a few folks that we'll be introducing pretty soon for the stakeholder presentations from the California Solar and Storage Association, Sunrun, and Tesla. And so we definitely will have those introductions coming up pretty soon for Yang Yu and then Kate Ungar and then Kevin, and I think John Hart as well. So we'll provide those introductions at the time of their presentation around 10. So at this time, let me get a quick audio and visual check for the Juan. I do see you, and I see Ansel as well, so everything looks good from my end. Juan, we can see you. I want to do a quick audio check. I can't hear you yet. Go ahead, try again.
Thanks, Brenda. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
All right, very good. All right, well, welcome everybody to our DDEMI working group session. I am a little bit under the weather. I'm going to try to mute myself in case I cough. I apologize for coughing at the onset of this meeting. So let's start a little bit with the working group progress to date. Again, this is an iterative progress or an iterative process, as you can see in that bottom right-hand corner. We have level set. We're continuing to find different issues or challenge areas. I will repeat myself on this item. If we have a new issue or challenge area that is identified throughout these conversations, even though it is marked complete, that is precisely what we want in our working groups. So please don't hesitate but we are in the middle of finalizing those problem statements and starting to assess those problem statements. So again, really appreciate the engagement that we've had thus far, and we are coming towards the end of our working group phase here. We've been going through these themes, and we've had really good engagement and conversation so far, so I'm looking forward to continuing that here today. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide, please. So let's start with the end in mind. What are we trying to do in today's working group meeting? We would like to finalize the problem statements on enhancing demand flexibility. For those of you who were able to join us on the July 29th working group session, we had quite a bit of conversation. We want to preview the finalized problem statements with this community for validation and then inclusion into the discussion paper. We also committed to coming back to the working group to continue refining a problem statement in the reliability demand response participation theme. We heard different perspectives on reliability DR participation, and we would like to revisit around the reliability demand response resources ability to re-rate to reflect their available megawatts. So let's go ahead and continue that discussion here today. And then we're also going to hear some stakeholder viewpoints and presentation on the current economic demand response participation and a little bit of a changed problem statement from what was presented at the last working group session. So we'd like to thank Cal SSA, Sandra, and Tessa for their engagement and presenting here. We will take that conversation, that presentation, and see if we can't formulate a problem statement based off of today's discussion as it relates to the economic demand response. And then I want to take a little bit of time, excuse me, I want to take a little bit of time to take a look at what is left here and review the remaining working group sessions that we have within DDEMI and really kind of plant the seed and ask for the stakeholder community for any stakeholder presentations or thoughts on the remaining themes that are left here in DDEMI. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. And there we go. Thank you very much. So this was a really good conversation that we had around the proposal to have DR inclusion into base schedules for WEIM entities. We were joined, we had John Rudolph join us and talk a little bit about the upcoming enhancements to the load forecast adjustment process. And there were some questions around the problem statements as they were presented at the last session. So this is a little bit of a updated slide here, and hopefully we are able to get some stakeholder input and kind of further confirm where we've landed here on these problem statements, and we're able to fold those into the discussion paper for the potential of future policy development work. So I think we had some really good consensus around that the current performance evaluation methodology options do not recognize alternative measurement methods used by WEIM entities, and some clear understanding on the current manual load forecast and adjustment process being cumbersome and perhaps not aligning with the different WEIM entities' demand response program timelines that were included there. We also broke this up into two different areas because we heard that there was a need for optionality, both a supply side and demand side model for participation. So let's take the supply side really quick here. The economic signals for PDR may not align with the temperature-dependent DR capacity, and we heard very clearly that there was a desire for economic dispatch of these resources in the day-ahead market. I think we had some solid consensus there. The one item that we would really like to seek further stakeholder input on is that there was also a desire for an alternative, a demand side option, an alternative to the load forecast and adjustment process for non-participating WEIM demand response programs. Given that we heard about some of the enhancements that were coming up in the load forecast adjustment process, the ISO would really like to hear from the community with the ability to have the automation that is coming in the load forecast adjustment process, the control of timing of when these are used. We wanted to explore the alternative for non-participating demand response programs and really hear what are some of the areas that the new load forecast adjustment process may not be providing. If we're going to be talking about the potential of a completely different alternative to the load forecast and adjustment process on the supply side, on the demand side, what are some of the key characteristics that perhaps are not covered in the enhancements that are coming up in the load forecast adjustment process? And we'd like to kind of flesh that out a little bit more. So we understand there's a desire for an alternative, but we need to turn that conversation into identifying really a problem statement that will allow us to see what kind of an alternative is needed by the EIM community. So I'm going to stop there, and I'd love to hear some thoughts from the community. So let's go ahead and open up the lines, and if anybody could just raise their hand or give us some thoughts here.
So for those folks who are trying to find a hand, make sure it's on the bottom of your screen. And also we are open to seeing any questions through chat, but raise your hand if you have any questions. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Brenda, do we have any hands raised or any questions in the chat here?
At this time, I don't see any questions in queue. If folks have any questions on the submitting a question or raising your hand, let us know. But at this time, everything looks good from my end to no questions in the queue line at this point. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, Brenda. And, you know, I think this is something that will be able to be a conversation that is continuing throughout this entire DDEMI process. Again, when we have a problem statement, we're going to continue to vet that, right, through regulatory and implementation and policy risks. So if this is something that is you know, a thought comes to mind, please don't hesitate to reach out directly to us. We are hearing, again, very clearly that an alternative is desired. We just want to thin slice, so to speak, and see where do we need to focus in on and what is not being provided by those enhancements. For those of you who were not able to join us for our last session, please do take a look at the previous session. There are both the slides on the initiative page as well as the recording itself, where we outline the load forecast adjustment enhancements that are occurring for the WIM community. It does take a lot of that manual process out. It removes a lot of the, or not a lot, but entirely, it removes that uncertainty threshold. So it is providing a WIM entity that ability to really call out when it would like to use its non-participating DR. So perhaps we can follow up offline with those who were part of that discussion at the last session and really dive a little bit deeper into what are some of the additional elements that aren't being provided by that load forecast adjustment process, and continue to flesh this out. But for now, I think we'll need to move forward, reflecting that there is a desire, and perhaps dig a little deeper and get a little bit more granular there. I'm going to give it just another moment to see if anybody would like to raise their hand. And Brenda, I don't see it on my end, but let me know if not, we can go ahead and move forward to the next slide here.
I don't see any more questions, but I did submit a chat just in case folks need to follow us on the link. We did post those slides available right now, and they're updated as well. Thank you.
Very good. All right, let's go ahead and continue on. This was another area where we had quite a bit of conversation around the reliability-based demand response problem statements. The majority of that theme and its associated problem statements were confirmed at our last session, but the re-rate conversation was one that kind of continued on quite a bit, and we thought it would be very important to come back here with an edited problem statement, and we're seeking stakeholder confirmation that we have in fact captured the spirit of that conversation and provide another opportunity to have further conversation here. So just as a level set, currently demand response resources do not have the ability to take any partial outages to reflect limited availability. And in that conversation that we had at the last session, it does seem that this is very specific to RDRR resources. We asked several times if this was a broader issue or specific to RDRR. And there were a couple of use cases that really kind of stuck out to us. Now, RDRR has the ability to be utilized for distribution system operational needs. So I apologize for starting from the bottom up on this slide here. But when a portion of an RDRR resource is utilized by the utility for distribution system operational needs, currently the ISO's outage system and the fact that it cannot take a demand response resource cannot take a partial outage will not allow for the remaining megawatt availability to be updated and reflected in the market. And the other scenario that I'm seeking confirmation, what I heard was that there is also a scenario in which partial availability needs to be reflected that with a preemptive reduction in that megawatt availability, such as resource testing, or if the process at the customer's location has reduced demand being utilized at the moment, which would in turn, of course, have less megawatts availability for reduction should it be called. So we took another crack at ensuring that we were in fact reflecting the PMIN, PMAX re-rate problem statements here, and we thought it very important to really capture the different scenarios in which it was being asked for, so to speak. So I'd like to take a moment here, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, SE, but I do see a couple of you in the attendee list. This was your problem statement. This is our edited version based off of that conversation. So we are seeking stakeholder input here to confirm these problem statements and kind of continue that conversation if needed. And John, I do see your hand. Please go ahead, sir.
First bullet point, I'm not sure where you guys got resource testing reduced demand due to process changes. I think more so this problem statement is regarding the use of RDRs for distribution, like grid reliability on our transmission group, and it's more so when RDRs is dispatched on the reliability side for the grid side. We want to better reflect that it's not completely out of the market. It's not completely utilized in its entirety. That we have the ability to re-rate down a little bit more. So just to give some perspective on this. So let's just say RDRs is broken out into SLAPs, right? If our grid reliability side is utilizing it due to like maybe a fire or something on the transmission side, we would like the ability to not have to outage out the entire SLAP, but a portion of that, meaning derate that portion. So so hopefully that clears up some misunderstanding.
No, I appreciate that, John, and I'm hoping that we're capturing that in the second bullet, right? When it is used by the reliability side for operational needs, as RDR is allowed to be utilized. You know, a 100 megawatt RDR resource, 20 of it's used for distribution system operational needs. You would like to be able to reflect that there are 80 megawatts available remaining to the ISO market. The resource testing and reduced demand due to process changes, et cetera, was really kind of a continuation of the scenario you just outlined. So let me pause it there and just make sure that second sub bullet, we'd be open to feedback if you feel like this doesn't capture it necessarily as a problem statement, but I think we are understanding that, you know, right now it's an all or nothing, and so the problem statement here is that you need the ability to reflect what remains as available. The first sub bullet, the resource testing, let's say that there was, you know, there's use limitations, right? So let's say that there's resource testing, and then you need to be able to reflect the reduced megawatt availability, or a customer has a customer completely independent of you know, with its own industrial processes has some changes for a week, reflecting that reduced megawatt availability. It's kind of a continuation of it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, but I think let's start first with that. When a portion of an RDR resource is utilized for distribution system operational needs, the current ISO outage system does not allow for the remaining megawatts, meaning that partial availability, to be updated and reflected in the market. Does that capture? Would you change that, or does that capture kind of what you're trying to accomplish here? And then
Yes,
we can move on to the first one.
Yes, it does capture it, the second part.
Okay, and then as far as, you know, some of the scenarios in which there may be other scenarios that might be reducing that availability. So looking at that first sub bullet, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and if that was out of the scope of what you were hoping to get to, or just, you know, help me understand from your perspective if there are other scenarios in which a partial outage would allow for more accurate reflection of megawatt availability.
So the other scenario that I could think of may be partially the ability to derate due to maybe anticipations of heat waves or emergent situations. where
Mhm.
you might not be able to get the megawatts from customers because let's just say it's extremely hot and maybe customers aren't willing to reduce their load shed because for whatever reasons it could be detrimental to their some we have some customers on medical baseline and so maybe those type of instances where we can't shut them off and so our megawatts need to be derated so that's kind of the situation that I think may not be warranted for us to derate the resource.
Okay. Thank you. I'm gonna pause here. I'd like to turn it over to maybe the ISO team to give some thoughts on that additional scenario that John just put forth.
Yeah, thanks, Juan. This is Ansel Lundberg from the policy group. I think for now, I wouldn't modify the list of examples that we have if that's, not inclusive. But that's my 2 cents here, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fine. I think the 2 bullet points would work and captures our position very well. Thank you.
Great.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well, thank you, John, and I'm glad to hear that this second pass at this problem statement is more in line with what we're hoping to accomplish in a future policy development effort here. Very good. So, Brenda, do we have any other hands or any other comments in the chat here?
I still see John's hand, and he's still unmuted. Unless John, if you don't have any questions, you could. Okay, great. I don't see any other questions right now. Thanks, team. No questions.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well, we made some rather quick work of those 2 different problem statements. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide here. Let's go ahead and move forward one more, please. So let's go ahead and Brenda, I think we're missing some slides here for the stakeholder presentation. Let's cue those up. This will be for the end of our session. I do want to. So you guys are getting a little bit of a preview. We do have 2 different themes that are left, but for now, yeah, let's go ahead and let's turn this over to the Sunrun Tesla and Cal SSA team. And again, we really do appreciate your engagement and your willingness to come and present here. So again, for those of you who perhaps were unable to join us on the 29th, we had a presentation on PDR for behind the meter storage and a really good conversation from there. Let's go ahead and give the floor to the team to kind of walk us through an edited problem statement and some of the rationale behind it, and then really looking forward to some of the conversation that ensues from that.
Okay, so this is Kate Unger with CALSA. I will jump in and thank the CAISO team for giving us the opportunity to speak again. At the last meeting, there were 2 presentations that had some sort of overlapping issues. The one from LEAP and SEDMEC and Renew Home, and then the one from our group where John Hart and Kevin Joyce spoke. And those 2 are both available. John is going to jump in with me. Kevin can chime in. Yang Yu from Sunrun is also here. I just wanted to start off with briefly the first problem statement, which is on the next slide. And so it's long and convoluted because we were trying to capture a lot. John is going to cover some of the issues. I will just say, I just hate how this came out as we were trying to capture everything, and I don't see this as the final version, but this is a way for us to be able to have the conversation. So the main part is because it's conceptualized as load curtailment, PDR doesn't include measured export of energy from individual locations. And John is going to speak to that a little bit more. But I did also want to just touch base on toward the end here, the issue that behind the meter storage aggregations can't offer the full resource capability, and PDR performance is artificially capped at levels reflecting conservative estimates of site load. So the point there is that because of the inability to count exports, we're not only limited to site load itself, but we're limited to what we can reliably expect to be able to offer, given the fact that we don't have control over site load in the sense of not knowing what it's going to be and needing to assume that it will be low in order to not be caught offering something that we can't actually deliver. So that is one of the things that we wanted to capture in this problem statement. And I think with that, it's useful to switch to the next slide and hope that John Hart can come off mute and speak to some of these higher level issues and context that we wanted to provide.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. And as was mentioned, we presented on these the last time, so I'm not necessarily trying to present this as new information, but a quick recap in that the PDR methodologies, both for the MGO and at the whole premise, prohibit, or not prohibit, but do not credit value for exported energy. The exported energy is zeroed out, and that then creates this scenario where site load becomes the limiting factor. There's typically a lot more capacity in the batteries available, but we're not able to offer that, and that creates a lot of problems. But essentially, we're not able to provide the full value, and the grid does not receive the full value of what these batteries have to offer. So that's, again, a more or less a recap of the discussion from last session. One of the major points we wanted to make, and we had sent this to CAISO staff, and they had asked us if we could talk more about this, which I'm happy we're able to now, is more along the lines that what we're asking is not just changes in the rules, but really a change in the mindset of how we, the royal we, general in California, how we view demand response and distributed resources. In the past, demand response has had kind of its flavor of its load drop only. And now the technologies that are out there are able to do more than just reduce usage, but are able to shift it, are able to export electricity, or able to discharge or generate electricity. And so we're in a new paradigm than we were in the past when demand response was initially created and introduced. And so what we're asking for, I think more than anything, is a reframing of how we look at distributed resources, and accepting and recognizing that they are able to do more than just reduce load, but can discharge energy or generate it, shift it to other times, and to value that and to build that into the PDR construct. PDR is definitely the best model available for behind the meter resources to participate in the CAISO market. We hope to in future sessions talk more about the DERP model and challenges there, but I won't get into that now since that's not what this is about. But just to summarize, really, PDR is really the only viable way that we're able to participate in the market. And the biggest challenge is the not being able to export. The second biggest challenge, and this is on the next slide, what we presented on last time as well, but also very much in this vein of having a mindset shift, is device level metering, where the current methodology requires revenue grade metering at each individual site within an aggregated resource. And I think, again, here's mindset shift of we're not, an aggregated resource is not necessarily identical to a single large generator that at that generator needs to have revenue grade metering. An aggregation is made up of a whole bunch of smaller resources. And within an aggregation, you don't need to have revenue grade metering at each individual site in order to have revenue grade accuracy for the entire aggregation. And so the problem statement there is that the existing methodology, the MGO methodology, requires, again, revenue grade metering and accuracy at each individual site. And that is extremely expensive, administratively difficult to go out and put in revenue grade meters at, potentially thousands, tens of thousands of homes and businesses after these resources have already been installed. And instead being able to rely on existing metering that's there and aggregating that together, and through the aggregating able to have revenue grade accuracy, or accuracy that meets the standard. I'm sure Kevin, if he's on, can state it a lot better than I did, but that in general is the problem statement. And again, biggest ask here is shifting the mindset away from each individual site needs to look like a large generator, to maybe more along the lines of the aggregation itself needs to look more like it, and each individual site does not need to look like a generator. I'll pause there and see if anyone on our side, so Kevin or Young, if you have anything you'd like to say.
On this last topic, I think you did. I think you did a good job of ultimately summarizing it. I think some of in terms of the challenges of making, as you correctly put it, each individual premise look like a power plant instead of the aggregation looking like a power plant to the ISO. It isn't necessarily a challenge with making sure that the data coming from that site is accurate, but to say that it requires ANSI C12 metering is to place a lot of just burdens on that site in terms of, well, what does it mean to actually be ANSI C12 certified? It really means needing a plastic blister on the wall, which is expensive, is burdensome. There are other ways to think about that data stream that could be more appropriate for the use case. So I guess my point is we need to be thinking holistically about what it takes to get that aggregate accurate signal as opposed to focusing too narrowly on the certification requirements and things like that. That's the only clarification I wanted to make. So thanks.
Very good, thank you. So if I'm understanding this proposed problem statement correctly here, this is very specifically around the device level metering proxying to revenue grade metering, creating a barrier for an aggregation. When we're talking about these devices being aggregated, I guess let me take a step back. Number one, I think I'm understanding the problem statement. But number two, what would be, and maybe I'm getting a little bit into the solution space, but I'm just curious, what would the proxy be for comparable performance metrics then? Because we're not a standards body. I think Jill mentioned that, but you know, what would we utilize? What do you foresee being utilized to show that kind of comparable performance? And Ansel, you know, feel free to jump in and pull me back if I'm getting into solutions here.
I think we can talk about that in terms of overall finding the solutions. You know, you're right that you're not that CAISO isn't a standards making body, but CAISO is being pretty specific when it comes to what kind of solutions are necessary at each individual site by invoking a certain implementation and a certain standard here. So there just needs to be more flexibility as to you know, the requirements for individual sites, and if necessary, you know, look for other ways to demonstrate the accuracy and fit for purposeness of the aggregate signal, rather than just, you know, the approach has been reasonable for individual sites to say, well, as long as you have a meter of this accuracy, then everything's cool. But you know, perhaps we need more flexibility into like, well, if the sites have, you know, one of these sets of standards might solve for it, or if I see now I'm just throwing out, you know, ideas and getting into solutioning, right? You know, if we, as part of the qualification process, can demonstrate that the response that you show is, you know, can be validated against service meters, you know, these kinds of things. You know, I'm throwing out solutions now, but other ways to validate that the aggregate signal is fit for purpose would be the solution space that I'd like to explore.
I appreciate that, Kevin, and again, it's hard not to get to solutions. So I appreciate that, and I'm the one that's meant to not take us down that road, and I led us down that road. I do see a hand up from John Kitchen. Let's go ahead and unmute John, please.
Thanks. Can you hear me? Oh, so yeah, I was just going to say,
Yes.
to their comment about or to your comment about what would change. I was just kind of curious as to like how that would be different from existing PIMs, right? Because really the only difference here is, I mean, the PIMs is all about establishing the baseline. What does the customer normally use on a day like this, and what's the difference? The only difference in this scenario is instead of them consuming a load, they're actually putting energy out. So like, I would still kind of see or envision that the same PIMS methodology applies, but it would just give them like it should just look at what is the difference, right? What do they normally do on a normal day? And, you know, now they're outputting instead of consuming, but that's just a difference from that. It shouldn't necessarily matter whether it's a positive value like energy going to them or whether they're pushing energy out.
I 100% love the way you're thinking, actually. That's exactly the way that we would encourage folks, or would want folks to think about all of this. The challenge and the problem statement that we're saying here is that you don't get the opportunity to do that, to do what you're describing with the current definition of PDR, because values, you know, going negative, as you put it, get zeroed out. That's just the way the things are written. And so that's the solution that we need to solve, so that those negative values are available to the PIM methodologies, at which point, we need to look into this with everybody, but at which point the rest of it should just work. Other markets would suggest that the rest of it just works, but we do need to get rid of that zeroing out mechanism.
I'm curious if the ISO team has any reactions.
Yeah. So I think I would just add, we kind of had this similar conversation in the beginning of the scoping discussion when we were talking about the PEMS problem statements, in that, yeah, I think you are right, John Kitchen, that, the baselines we have can be adjusted sort of mechanically to allow for exporting. I think there's, if and when we get into the solutioning, as far as bigger PDR reforms, there's more that needs to be investigated than just changing the baseline for individual elements of the aggregation, perhaps. To ensure that the current model for PDR, of course, is all resources within the aggregation are limited to curtailment to zero, as well as across the aggregation. What we heard last meeting was, a change to that sort of structure, retaining the second part of aggregating aggregated curtailment limited to above zero, but for the individual elements, there would be a change there. So I think just acknowledging that, yes, the mechanics of changing the baseline methodology is fairly straightforward. I think there's more that needs to be discussed if we're talking about addressing a problem statement on the previous slide. So, and then on the metering point, just to circle back to that, I think there was a comment earlier about the standards, and Juan, you had suggested or floated the question as far as like what what standards should the ISO include, and Kevin's comment about making things more flexible. I think in our tariff, we have these standards as a sort of a default if there's nothing specified. But generally, I think we discussed this at the last meeting. The ISO tends to defer to local regulatory authority requirements for metering, and so I believe stakeholders raised a discrepancy in some of the EV metering accuracy requirements, and so that's the kind of thing that I think would come out of discussing solutions to this problem on the screen. So.
If I can offer one more clarification in this problem statement too. So when we say revenue grade meters, so broadly speaking, the meter at the battery inverter are revenue grade and largely follow the C12 metering standard. I think the challenge is the accuracy requirement is cumbersome for each individual meter, especially if we're talking about certification for all meters within the aggregation. I think for this problem statement, we're pointing to if we can look at the meter requirements at the aggregation level and maybe a different accuracy standard within the C12, broader metering standard, I think that can enable device level metering at the aggregation level for, this type of behind meter storage more effectively.
Thank you, Yang. So I see two hands. So Kate, I see your hand. Please go ahead, and then Perry, I see your hand in the queue as well. We'll go over to you next.
I'm going to defer to Perry because I think I was going to jump back to the other sort of broader issue. So if we're still talking about the metering, I'd rather hold off.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Perry, let's go ahead and unmute Perry, please.
Hey, this is Perry Servideo from the California Energy Storage Alliance. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, Perry.
All right, thanks, Juan. Hey, on this topic, on device level metering, we're talking about behind the meter storage. assets here. And these are really a big part of getting the state towards its goal of 7 gigawatts of demand flexibility by 2030, a goal for which we are seriously behind target on achieving. And I think that one way to think about this behind the meter storage issue is in that context. And I just wanted to ask, we're talking about devices that are sub-metered. This slide is talking about the ANSI C12 standard, but let's just say we have behind the meter storage devices that are sub-metered. And we talked about this earlier on in this working group process too. I'm just wondering if there's any issue to the extent that CAISO, to the extent that you have a resource that is bidding into CAISO's market, getting a dispatch from CAISO's market, and we have a sub-meter that can monitor the response to that dispatch. Is there any issue with just observing that sub-meter as the response to the CAISO dispatch? And I think that gets, at what Tesla was getting at too. Then you're not worried about whether this is a negative or a positive. It's just this metered response, which measures your participation and response to a CAISO dispatch. Do you guys see any issue with just that simplistic kind of thinking here? I think it would go a long way towards getting a lot more participation in this space and getting us back on track to that 7 gigawatt demand flexibility goal.
Thanks, Perry. I'll need to defer to the ISO team on a response to that one.
Yeah, thanks, Juan. I think I heard that was a question or sort of a check-in for CAISO. I would say, you're sort of asking like a conceptual question, because of course, so for a conceptual answer, I would say what you're floating sounds like more similar to the distributed energy resource aggregation model that we have at CAISO that's for Order 2222 compliant, except for the word that you said sub-metered. So in that sense, we have, of course, we have the metering generator output baseline methodology, which would be a little bit different from what you suggested, because that is relative to the site meter, right? And the calculation includes the difference between the site meter and the sub meter. So I think it depends on the model that you're talking about, I guess would be the answer to your question. I think it would be worth exploring more.
It would be very similar to what you're talking about with PDR that can currently use the MGO PEM. It would be very similar to that, except it would just recognize that these are sub-metered resources that are responding to CAISO dispatch. There's actually no real need for any type of calculation in there to muddy it up further is my thought on it, as long as you have a sub-metered value. So it would be essentially to just clean up the MGO and then apply it to any resource that's got sub-meters on it. I think it would go a long way towards increasing participation. Then you get into this issue that's on this slide, which is now what is your standard for your device level metering, and do you actually need it to be ANSI C12 or not? Although my understanding is that some large sites with large installations do have ANSI C12. Tesla's point's a very good point as well, though, is to the extent that you have lots of smaller installations that can aggregate up. We're talking about a large number of megawatts that CAISO operators would want to have control over and send a dispatch to and get a metered response on, where if we could really think about, first off, what is the minimum metering standard you need? Second, if you figured out a way to do basically the MGO, but it's just a sub-metered behind the meter storage metering schema. Yeah, I'm just not sure what the what would stop us from going in that direction.
Thanks, Perry.
Perry.
Yeah, I made some notes here.
Kate, before we go to your hand, I just want to I want to kind of come back to this, and my comment earlier on the solution is that this is hearkening me back to some of the earlier PEM discussions that we had in this working group, and we did have a problem statement on. The reason I asked, what would the comparable performance standard be is we have a problem statement in this working group that the use of, in essence, asking for the opening up of the use of device level metering to develop baselines. So to the Sunrun, Tesla, and Cal SSA team, I'm hearing, that can you help me understand where this might differ from the ability to use device level metering in order to establish those baselines to meet
this is different because all of those
accuracy
baselines
standard, and then I'm sorry.
Yeah, like they've
Perry,
said, this is different. Yeah, this is Perry. I'm sorry, but like they've said, that all of those baselines will zero it out. And they've been pretty clear that would be the enhancement that would be need to be made to the baseline. And I'm just saying, why do we care, about zeroing out a baseline or negative or positive? Just these are sub-metered devices, just meter them, and that's their performance in response to a KAISO dispatch. That's what I was suggesting, and that's the nexus between this what I've been saying and this topic.
Got it. Thanks, Perry.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll jump in and say, I think
please go ahead.
If I'm hearing Perry correctly, he's essentially saying, I think this goes back to the point John was making about trying to have a bit of a mind shift about PDR. And I feel like there are sort of two axes here. One is about thinking about the specific device that is participating, and I'll actually back it out and say the aggregation of devices that is participating in PDR. And if it's a behind the meter battery aggregation, then you want to measure at the battery, and it's immaterial what is happening at the premises level. But aside from that, you can measure the battery performance relative to what the battery would do on other days. Sorry, again, I should back out and say what the aggregation would do on other days. And you're using the performance at the individual sites, but to the extent that they are all part of the aggregation. And what you really want to measure is the aggregation, and you want to measure it against what it does on other days and not against a premises. I do have another point. I can pause there if anybody wants to add in, or I'll jump to the other point if folks don't want to.
Kate, I did have a question on that, just for clarification. I think it might benefit folks is the additional distinction that you've added there. I know that the PEM currently does, well, I should say attempts to do a comparison to what it does on other days. Is that, in my mind, I'm, broadly rethinking this thing and thinking, does that matter so much as long as the resource is doing what KAISO told it to do as basically as a participating resource? Why does part of this have to look back at, what it did on other days if it's sub-metered and responding to KAISO?
Yeah, Perry, I totally hear what you're saying, and I think that that's a conversation we would love to have. I don't know that it's not something that we have articulated as one of our problem statements right now, so it does jump a little bit beyond. But I would say as a general thing, we CALSA members do feel like it is time for California to start thinking about a new approach where we look, there are other jurisdictions across the country that do it this way, where performance is just measured based on what is delivered during an event without the use of baselines. And I would invite John, Young, Kevin to jump in if they have comments on that. But if we want to, rein it in and go back, then I can move on to the other thought that I wanted to say after they have their opportunity.
Kate, if you wouldn't mind just holding on to that other topic, I do like the idea of just organically having this conversation. So please do jump in if there are additional thoughts you would like to share, team.
Yeah, please, John, Young, Kevin, jump in on not measuring against non-event day baselines.
Yeah, I agree. It's a little bit of a different topic than what we've teed up here in terms of these problem statements, and just I think maybe there are some PEM related problem statements elsewhere where we can ultimately tackle this. But it is the case that that in other places there is a more straightforward interpretation, of the metered response for providing providing the signal that's used for performance measurement. But it really comes down to the ultimate selection of that performance methodology. Just choosing to use direct metered, forgive me if I don't get the term exactly right, as the performance methodology, I think would be one version of what's being proposed here. Ultimately, the problem statement that we were raising here was just to the nature of the signal to which that's applied, and making sure that we're communicating all of the different barriers, and one of them is the requirements for that signal.
Yeah, I think building on that, the problem statement, one of the big things, recognizing exports is different than how it's measured. So using a measured baseline from non-event days, or not having a type of baseline, just having it directly metered, is different than what we're proposing. I don't want to get those mixed up in that if the CAISO, for example, is not ready or willing, open to moving away from measured baselines, I don't want that to get in the way of our giving credit for exports discussion, because they are two separate discussions. If the CAISO is interested in looking at alternatives to a measured baseline, absolutely, I would want to have that discussion, but it is a different problem statement than what we're discussing. Just a quick example, the only program I know of in California that does not have a measured baseline from past events is the DSGS program. It has more of a just direct metering. There is what's called a prescriptive baseline in it, where you basically get a set percentage haircut on your performance. But because of that, and also DSGS does value or credit exports, that program has grown in 2023 was the first year that they had what's called option 3, which is designed specifically for behind the meter batteries. That program from part season in 2023 now into 2025 has grown from something like 10 megawatts to over 700 megawatts. And so in my opinion, those crediting exports and not using a measured baseline are major reasons why that program has been so attractive and successful. Yeah, I'll stop there.
No, I appreciate that reset, John, and I brought up the PEM discussion because it reminded me of it, and we did have one around device level that we said we would come excuse me, we said we would come back to and kind of continue conversation on, but I think you kind of brought us back on course that that really it's the ability to measure and account for the export. I'm sorry, guys. Excuse me. That you're trying to capture here, correct?
Juan, that brings me back to the other topic I was going to come back to, and maybe this is a good opportunity for me to do that.
Go ahead, Kate.
Thank you so much. Ansel was the one who mentioned it, that last time the discussion was around being able to allow for let's call like negative numbers. And the discussion was currently it's zeroed out at the premises level. And there was discussion about expanding that to allow to go negative at the premises level, but then keep positive at the aggregation level. And that is the idea of the modified PDR, which could work for an aggregation that is, let's call it hybrid, that it has behind the meter batteries and other kinds of resources that are very much load curtailment resources, where you can keep a net positive performance across the aggregation. And this brings us back to PDR is demand response, which is limited to load. And this is where we come back to, look at this now, I'm having difficulties with my voice. Pardon me. This brings us back to our request for thinking more broadly about PDR, allowing it to be a vehicle for behind the meter battery aggregations to participate in the CAISO market. By recognizing that even at the aggregation level, it could be possible to have a net negative load, but that it still is on the, let's call it the demand side or the distribution side in the structure, and there will still be net positive load in the structure of the grid. So it should be able to accommodate an aggregation that goes net negative. That's what we are asking for. I think that Kevin has spoken to this in the past and might have more thoughts. John might have more thoughts, but this is in essence what we're saying is, can we look to a broader idea of what PDR allows to enable behind the meter batteries to use it, even if there is a net negative across the aggregation?
And just a quick footnote to that I would want to add is it is expected that each individual site is following its interconnection agreement, meaning that if it does not have ability to export as part of its interconnection agreement, that does not change. It will not be exporting. So these sites that are exporting have permission to do so from the utility. And I think that's really important in recognizing that everything that would be happening as far as exports is taken into consideration by the distribution utility when interconnecting these resources.
Yeah, so I think that was, I definitely understand the scope of what is being floated here, and kind of this idea of rethinking the sort of demand response as curtailment of load question. I would say, based on the discussion, we've captured the issues well in this problem statement and the previous slide. I do think that some of this discussion of moving beyond the limit of demand response to curtailing to load could be discussed further in I think what's the next topic in the discussion paper, which is increasing distributed energy resource participation, because I would be interested to hear more about limitations with CAISO's DERA model, which does, not have that limit on curtailment of load and is more focused on participation of behind the meter resources in the wholesale market. So.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and we
Ansel.
do plan to engage on that topic. It's important to make the point up front, though, that there's a lot of work to be done on the DERA model in order to make it workable at all. PDR is practical already in many regards. However, we see this as the no accreditation for exports a major obstacle, and one that has a pretty apparent solution that doesn't require you changing massive parts of the tariff or anything, but really changing the methodology. So we see this as a good place within PDR to advocate for this, but at the same time, definitely recognize what you're saying about DERA, and we plan to engage on that. But really, we don't see that as a viable opportunity as it exists right now.
And to follow
Appreciate
along
that.
as a corollary, I think at this point we are basically volunteering. We believe that we would like to present on that topic. So we are looking forward to digging more into that. And also appreciate Ansel's point. I think that probably we've covered most of this topic. I will just say that there are a couple of comments in the chat that might be worth turning to, but we'll defer to the CAISO team on where to go next.
I appreciate that. Thank you all. So I see hands. So why don't we go to John Kitchen, and then Brenda, if you wouldn't mind reading us the comments in the chat after.
Sounds good. I think that was from John. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, John Kitchen here, PG. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, just a couple of comments is I do remember in previous conversations that there were other entities that have concerns around needing to register their individual customers multiple times for different programs. So that was a concern of them. And so if we go this route of having metering, direct metering for battery, I think you go down that path of now you also have to have a customer register multiple times, right? You'd have to have your battery registered. Then if you got a thermostat, water heater, whatever program that you're registered for, they would have to have multiple registrations. The other thing that I wanted to mention is even if you go down this route of the battery, having a meter for the battery, you still have the issue of what happens when the overall house is exporting and they're enrolled in other programs. How are you going to calculate the benefit of those other programs when the house is exporting? Right. So I think that's still something that needs to be assessed and looked at. I think that you can, yes, like you can separate out, and I'm all about having meters and getting as much data as you can, but you still have that problem overall that the customers are going to be enrolled in multiple programs, right? So how do you solve for that in this case when they have an excess of generation and batteries and now they're exporting? How do we still get them credit for their thermostat programs or other things?
And I know this is
Thanks,
something
John.
that, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just jumping in,
go
but
ahead.
John, please. I just was thinking about this when I saw it in the chat, and I somewhat hesitate to speak out of turn without checking in with my team first, but my instinct is that if being involved in multiple programs is an issue as an interim, I think our goal is certainly to enable multiple devices. I believe that the LEAP Renew Home SEDMEC team was envisioning the possibility of having behind the meter batteries and also smart thermostats involved in programs. I believe that there are ways to use sub-metering approaches for smart thermostats and some other devices. So as long as we have multiple program participation with multiple devices that each can be measured separately, I think that takes care of the concern that John is envisioning. And it might be, as I say, on an interim basis at least, where there is the need to measure at the premises meter for some participation, while also recognizing performance at a sub-meter level for others. If there's no practical way to do that in the interim, perhaps we just don't allow that.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. I was about to raise the same point. I think there's two part answer to this question. I think first of all, as we enable device level metering for behind meter storage, we are actually not introducing an extra problem measuring, thermostat behind the same utility meter, because that is the issue already happening today. Imagine a single customer having both devices from the utility meter. The storage is actually cycling basically on daily basis for customer bill management use case. And in that case, more likely, the meter load between 4 to 9 window is largely zero. So when you measure your thermostat performance using the same utility meter, you are seeing zero performance. So even if we enable device level metering for storage, that the issue for this multi-device performance measurement already exists today. And second, I think if you look at the DSGS program, I think option 4 introduced a new performance methodology to measure thermostat, I think using like a statistical analysis. So if we can enable that approach over here, I think we can independently measure performance for different devices behind, the same utility meter here.
Thank you, Colin. Colin, I see your hand, but I do want to have some of the comments in the chat reflected. Brenda, would you mind reading some of those out, and then we can go to Colin? I'm sorry. Then we can go to Colin.
Yeah, I do see a few of the chat questions. One, just want to double check. Are we going back to like the one from like the last hour? Make sure I want to capture the ones from like earlier.
Let me go ahead. Let me pull these up 1 second here. All right. So,
yeah. I'll just jump in to say, I think
so,
John
Helen,
articulated the one that he had put in the chat.
Got it. Okay. I appreciate that, Kate.
So there would be two from Helen.
Let's go ahead. Yeah, and it looks like Helen has the same question. So Helen, if you have any additional thoughts to what John said, go ahead and raise your hand here. But for now, let's go ahead and let's go to Colin.
Yeah, just to put a finer point on what Yang was saying, I definitely hear John Kitchen's concern about multiple device level metering options, requiring customers to register multiple devices. But I did want to point out that there is a corollary problem that is happening right now, which is that customers who have perhaps a smart thermostat registered in a PDR program or a demand response program are unable to register their battery because they're already registered through a smart thermostat provider. So you can imagine a situation in which, like, a company that can control a customer's smart thermostat, but not their battery, enrolls them in a PDR program. They buy a battery. That battery provider wants to enroll them in PDR as well. They're not able to do that because the customer's already enrolled through their smart thermostat provider, and you lose out on that sort of like that battery's capacity. The customer isn't able to enroll that battery in the program. And so I did want to point out this, make this counterpoint because, although it's not ideal that we don't want customers to be registering devices redundantly. But if there is more flexibility in enrollments that is enabled by allowing customers to register resources at the device level, there are benefits to that as well.
Thank you, Colin. And I do see, sorry about that. Now I do have the chat pulled up. So Amy from SEE, if different DRPs are registering and measuring devices for the same customer, will the CAISO or someone look at that customer to ensure that performance or settlement measurements are not greater than what's recorded by the customer retail meter. Said differently, there should be checks in place to ensure that performance of multiple devices for the same customer is not greater than the actual grid impact. I might defer to you, Ansel, to take that one.
Yeah, I mean, and appreciate the question, or sort of the somewhat of a rhetorical, but also a specific question. I think this is reminding me of some conversations that we had in the, I think it was the performance evaluation methodology discussions earlier this year about device level participation problem statements. I think this is, Amy, you're speaking to the structure of our demand response models today, which are, oriented around measurement at the site meter primarily to understand how to deal with these impacts that you are highlighting in your question. So I think that if we were pursuing the solution path for some of these device level participation issues that have been raised in this conversation, we would have to check in on, how to ensure performance. And so I just leave it there.
Okay, thank you. Cal, SSA, Tesla Sunrun team, this was a great discussion. Admittedly, we did broaden the scope a little bit. We kind of went off, we included, I think, more conversation than your two problem statements. We do appreciate that conversation though. Any closing thoughts for the working group to think about here?
I guess my highest level
Yang
thought,
or Kevin, John. Yeah, go ahead, John.
My highest level thought is, and we presented stats on this last time, but there is several gigawatts worth of behind the meter batteries out there already. There's even more other types of DERs out there. We are very hungry for opportunities to use these resources and provide payment for those. So we want value streams. We're looking for these. We are very open to working with the CAISO. I hope that's apparent in us, presenting these. And the solutions, we're eager to get into the solution space. I guess my biggest point is, if we can resolve these rules in a way that make it practical for behind the meter resources and batteries to really provide the full, or at least a lot more value than they're currently able to now, everybody benefits as a result. And so that's really what we're trying to achieve. And so I hope that our presentation, suggestions, everything that we are doing are seen through that lens of trying to ultimately provide a solution. I know that we're not in necessarily the solution phase of this now, but that's what our goal is to work towards.
I appreciate that, John, and it's absolutely being seen through that lens. So thank you very much for your comments and the presentation. I do see one hand up here from Thomas. Let's go ahead and unmute Thomas, please.
Hello. Sorry, there was a little breakup in the signal there. This is Thomas Lee from Doropi. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Thomas. We can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just to kind of respond to John Kitchen's comment, but I believe it was John Kitchen's, and then also Colin from LEAP about registering multiple devices and getting device level data. I think this is actually precisely what we want. That actually there are technologies and techniques available in the market today that makes this actually very easy for the end customer. And so I don't think that we should be afraid of or concerned about actually registering multiple devices from customers and using device data. This is actually something that is actually quite common in a lot of other use cases. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Appreciate that. Okay, Brenda, can we?
Yeah.
Well, let's give it a moment. I don't see anything else yet. No hands. All right, could we go ahead and move on to the next slide?
We do have a hand. Doug just raised it. Let's take his hand.
Perfect.
Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, Doug, let's go.
And let's go back to slide. What slide would you guys like to show? The slide 4? Is that okay?
Yes, that's fine. Doug,
yeah,
go ahead.
I just thought I'd join the scrum here. So Doug Karpa from Peninsula Clean Energy. I'm putting in a plug for device level management and participation. Part of our perspective is that, we're a government agency. We work with a lot of homeowners to do like whole home electrification. And it would be, so we're installing many different devices in homes. And what we are hoping to avoid is a situation where like there is a single like smart thermostat that's enrolled that takes the entire service address out of the picture for every other device that we're installing. And so to avoid those I think there was a point raised earlier that like, hey, if you don't have this capability, then you are freezing yourself out of being able to take advantage of all the other devices in a home. And so I think, from our model, that ability to have multiple devices in a single service address is actually going to prove to be pretty helpful for the kind of work that we're doing and like looking at a holistic picture of entire buildings, entire residences, multifamily, that sort of thing. So for what that's worth. Thanks.
Thanks, Doug. All right, let's see. Let's give it a moment if we have any other hands or any other comments. And I see Colin's hand. Colin, go ahead.
Yeah, just a question to Doug Karpa. I'm curious, if you were installing multiple devices at customers' homes and these devices could be registered individually into the market, couldn't you just register those devices individually into the market and so avoid any conflict with devices that currently exist at the customer's premise?
Let's go ahead and I see both John and Doug, but let's go ahead and let Doug respond. If we could unmute Doug, please.
Yeah, I think if I understand the question, yeah, that would be the idea, that we'd be able to register to all those other devices. I think if we, like in the use case where the customer isn't already participating and we are installing all of the devices, we probably like register that at a service address level and just aggregate all of them. That's probably the preferred model. But a lot of the folks that we work with often are early adopters of various technologies. So they may like have a thermostat or they may have a battery that's already participating in somebody else's program. And so what we're trying to avoid is the situation where if we're going to do go beyond the one device they already have to put in a whole bunch of other things, we don't want to like, hey, you have to break your contract with some vendor. And then if they refuse to do that, then we're kind of stuck and locked out. And so I think that's the additional functionality that we're trying to unlock. I don't think if that homeowner doesn't have already a pre-existing relationship that they don't want to break, then we would probably integrate at a service level. I think that answers your question.
Thanks, Doug. Mr. Kitchen, I see your hand, but let's go ahead and unmute Colin real quick, and then Doug and Colin, if we could just ask the two of you to remain off of mute.
Yeah, just to follow up on what you said, Doug, and just make sure I'm understanding correctly, or maybe I'm not understanding correctly, because it seems like if a customer is already enrolled in a demand response program because they're an early adopter and have a battery at the premise, if they're not able to register that battery individually, then they would have to register the whole home in that program. And so then if you came in and installed more devices at that customer's home, you would similarly be shut out from registering that customer in the program because they'd be registered through their battery provider, for example, and they have to break that contract with the battery provider in order to enroll their entire premise with you as PCE. Whereas it seems like if you were able to register those devices, those new devices that you install at the customer's premise individually, they wouldn't need to break their contract with their battery provider at all, because you could just register their smart thermostat directly, their smart hot water heater directly, what have you. It seems like in my mind, that seems like the clearest way to avoid conflicts in this situation. So I'm just seeing if there's something that I'm missing.
No, that was the sound of me nodding vigorously. I think you've captured it exactly.
Very good. Always appreciate the stakeholder to stakeholder conversations in these working groups. John Kitchen, let's go ahead and go to you.
Yeah, thanks, Juan. Yeah, just a couple comments back. So I was mentioning earlier, I think that having the sub meter on the battery provides more data. I like having more data. And I wasn't saying that it necessarily introduces more problems. What I was saying is, if you measure that, and then the customer still has additional things, they have rooftop solar, or they have other things, and then they have other programs, you still have the problem where the primary meter shows an export. So that's what I was trying to say is, even if you do this metering, you're going to have to solve for what happens if the customer has other programs and their primary meter is showing an export. You could potentially take and subtract out the battery meter from that, but that doesn't necessarily, for one thing, I don't know what quality the secondary meter would be. And the other thing is, if they have rooftop solar or other stuff, that still doesn't get you a guarantee that they're now going to show an export and then they would get credit for those programs, right? So I think that's a problem that's going to exist no matter what, with some of these households, because they're actually exporting during these times. The other piece that I was just going to say is, I get and I can appreciate the complexities of trying to have these different programs and different VPP vendors and stuff, and we have to pave the way for them. But I know that there's also some comments about using device level meters. I don't know if we, I don't know if we would get to that point, because there's a lot more metering standards and stuff that are upheld to the meters, like what we put in and allow to be measured for the market. So, and then, maintenance and documentation associated with that. I don't know if you get the same level of guarantee with other residential devices, metering devices, right? If we could get to that point, I think that it would be great. And I could definitely see using some of that data as just real-time telemetry. I just don't know if it necessarily meets the settlements quality piece of that we would require for settlements. And then also, if we did have multiple different things like water heater and residential thermostat behind one POI, behind one customer meter, with enrolled through different VPP vendors, that also makes it difficult, because then how do you use the settlements quality meter that you've got to separate those out? So I don't have the right answer, but there's a lot of challenges there.
I appreciate that, John. And I think those are good points and all really important considerations as we kind of transition from the problem statements into exploring them a little bit further. So I really appreciate you sharing those. Let's see if we have any other new hands. I don't believe we have any other.
Yeah. I think if anything, I see Kate's hand go up around the same time. Don't want to miss her hand. Just Kate, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's right. I was just going to briefly respond again, I think, to some of the things that John said. And I agree that we are at the point now where we're starting to have kind of a solutions discussion. So I'm just going to keep this very short and say that, again, I think that there is a sense in which what we're talking about here is an aggregation of different devices at the premises that's aggregated up to what you see at the premises meter. And we're instead envisioning aggregations that are not at the premises, but are within the different aggregations of different devices. and you aggregate up to a signal, a measurement that allows for greater accuracy than the individuals. And I know Kevin has talked about this before, and we can talk about it again, so I won't get into the details. But I would just say that I think that there are ways that we can address this. That said, I think that John raised some important points that utilities have to keep in mind about requirements that they are held to, and we're looking forward to the conversation.
Juan, you're on mute. Just want to let you know. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate. I appreciate that. Brenda, let's go ahead and double check me. Make sure there are no hands. And let's go ahead and move to the next slide, please.
Okay, sounds good.
And let's go ahead and thank you again to the Cal SSA Tesla and Sunrun team. We genuinely appreciate your continued engagement and partnership in this whole discussion, and I think we're all eager to start moving towards some of the possibilities that exist here. Brenda, let's go ahead and move to the next slide.
Okay. Slide 15.
And let's go ahead. We've done a little bit here. I think we've captured the two problem statements, and as Ansel mentioned, those two problem statements are pretty accurately reflecting this. I think we did highlight several areas to consider as we move forward with those problem statements. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide quickly here, and I do want to update it. And Kate, you mentioned you were raising your hand now for the distributed energy participation, so appreciate that. I do want to just highlight the next steps for the remaining DDEMI themes here. So with the reliability-based DR and the demand flexibility market options confirmed here, we will move forward in updating that discussion paper. We talked here today, and it sounds like we have some good direction around the inclusion of the economic demand response problem statements, and that really leaves us with two different themes that remain within DDEMI. And so our next meeting is going to be on September 9th. What we would like to do is have the ISO provide a little bit of a level set on the area, but we would really like to have some stakeholder perspective and presentations on any potential issue areas or challenge areas in these themes. The first one would be the expanding demand side bidding options, and then of course there would be the distributed energy resource participation. So please do not hesitate to reach out. You can reach out to Stakeholder Affairs or myself, Jill Ansel, if you're interested in presenting. But we have our two remaining themes here, and we'd like to tackle the both of them on September 9th. So I'm putting a call out to the stakeholder community, anyone who is interested in presenting any of the potential problem statements that you may have within the expanding demand side bidding options and distributed energy resource participation. We look forward to hearing from you, and we look forward to a good discussion on that at our next session. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide, Brenda. And with this, I'll turn it over to our, you know what, I see TJ. So TJ, let's go ahead and unmute you. Let's go back one slide, Brenda.
I raised my hand by mistake. Well done.
Oh, okay. Very good. Not a problem. Again, feel free to reach out offline if you're interested in presenting on the remaining two themes of expanding demand side bidding options or DER participation. With that, Brenda, let's go ahead and hand it over to you to close this out for today.
Thank you, Juan. So today's next steps, we want to definitely share a few items. But first, I wanted to give a huge thank you to the ISO team, Juan and Ansel, who are here today to present a few topics on the proposal, and as well Sunrun, Tesla, and Cal SCCA that were able to attend. We definitely appreciate your time here today for our call. For the next step of the iteration of the discussion paper will be drafted enhancing demand flexibility and reliability demand response participation. As well, we are calling, as Juan mentioned, a few stakeholder presentations. Feel free to send them over, email us, also at the ISO stakeholder affairs at kaiso.com. We did have updated those slide decks. I have provided that link earlier this meeting. It's under our californiaiso.com at the Stakeholder Center tab, and go and drop down to Demand and Distributed Energy Market Integration Working Group. We do have some few updates for the upcoming what's happening here at the ISO. We did have one training opportunity yesterday, and I do have one coming up this week in terms of the ISO EDAM day ahead market and a few items that are on the training side. Those are also provided at the ISO calendar for those who want to attend with those links provided too. We do have a settlement BPM walkthrough for EDAM access charge on the 19th. We do have a new interconnection customer user group launching on the 19th as well, and a few others with the RC West as well. They're having on the Thursday. So there's another workshop also for the extended day ahead market implementation, which is kind of important for those to me to highlight. At this time, we do have one comment period coming up on the 20th for the greenhouse gas coordination working group. So feel free to submit those comments by end of day. And then a CBTs that are kind of listed about what we have for the market participant portal. I do have Ansel. Go ahead, Ansel. You want to highlight a little bit of what I mentioned? Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Brenda. Sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to touch on a question from Colin in the chat, asking if the problem statement that we discussed today, if they would be included in the iteration of the next iteration of our discussion paper. One, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the answer is yes, and there will be an opportunity to comment as we have had in the past.
That's absolutely correct, Ansel.
Yeah. That's all for me. Thanks, Brenda.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Definitely want to highlight that. Thanks so much. To continue, we just have a few more updates. It's the same about the upcoming market simulation. So for those who are following us, this is more of a standard slide. And then lastly, but not least, we do have the Energy Matters blog that has highlighted just recently, the most recent one with the new EDAM training sessions that are really kind of great opportunity for those folks to kind of listen in to a few of our senior advisors reviewing a lot of material for our EDAM. So at this time, this video will be recorded. It has been recorded and will be posted to the Stakeholder Center. You will also be able to see this very first the YouTube channel on California ISO. If you're able to see it, it'll pop up there, and then it'll kind of be added to our webpage pretty soon, right after that. But it'll be about 2 or 3 business days. At this time, we definitely appreciate everyone's comments. The new system of the WebEx, we're trying to kind of keep it more simple. And I did see John's comment. I'll definitely reply to you in a minute. But other than that, we definitely appreciate everyone's participation and look forward to seeing you at the next upcoming working group. At this time, I'll go ahead and pass it to Tegan to help me close this meeting. Thank you all.
That concludes our conference. Thank you for using Intel or events. You may now disconnect.